that need to look at this. We're in a global financial war.
Right.
It's war.
Okay.
Because the sanctions were an act of war if you look at it from the perspective of those who are being sanctioned. Okay, so there's a war taking place, and the U.S. is fighting that war in whatever way they can. And the last thing that the U.S. needs is a $3,000 gold price. Because that's just going to alert everybody that there's a problem. And it's been no secret that since the U.S. abandoned gold in 1971, they've tried to suppress it to allow the U.S. dollar to maintain its supremacy. Okay, and that supremacy is important in terms of your home interest rates, keeping them low. It's important to anchor inflation expectations. It's important for a whole bunch of reasons. And if you look back, they were very overt about it, the West being Europe and the U.S. about selling gold to suppress its price during the 60s and the 70s. You had the London Gold Pool, which was very open about selling their gold. And then during the 70s, the U.S. sold, between 1974 and 1980, the U.S. sold 1,000 tons of gold, and they convinced the IMF to sell another 700 tons of gold. And then they got smarter. Then they realized, hey, we can't sell our physical gold. That's going to work against our interests. So they discovered derivatives, futures and swaps and leases, which are highly levered and allows policymakers through their bullion dealer relationships to suppress the price of gold without losing their physical ownership of it. Just by, if you think about it, futures are levered 20-to-1, gold futures. So with a $10 million margin, you can sell $200 million worth of gold, and you can spook the market. And the way they do it is, and here's the thing, this is what I tweeted the other day. I started my life on a trading desk. I've been a trader all my life in terms of mentality, watching markets. And I've watched the gold price almost on an hourly basis since 20-something years ago. And what I've noticed is that lately, when there's a massive sell order, when there's the crushing of the gold price, it's quite vicious. And to me, it looks like it's done on purpose, and it's done to scare investors away from gold and to keep the gold price down. And they've done a very good job of it. And so they wait for days when the markets are thin, or they wait till the COMEX is about to close, and then also you get this massive selling of all these contracts, and it triggers stop losses, it does all sorts of things, scares everybody away, and then they cover it, and they don't need to sell their physical gold. And that's what I think is happening here. The Fed, I think in working with the bullion banks, and I think that they don't necessarily have to communicate directly with the bullion banks. They can do it through the BIS and give the BIS instructions to sell futures, and that's then executed through the bullion banks. And occasionally, you see occasionally these bullion banks, they all get caught spoofing the market. They all get fined some amount of money, but they're making so much money it doesn't matter. I mean, that $1 billion fine for JP Morgan, I mean, that was the biggest, but that wasn't the first. They've been caught doing this forever, and they can do it because they can sell future contracts. They can also use what's the unallocated gold holdings in brokerage accounts. And I don't know if you know the difference between allocated gold and unallocated gold, but the idea is that perhaps there's between 20-to-1 and 100-to-1 ratio between what is unallocated. And unallocated gold means that if you're an investor and you purchase your gold through a broker, you don't have a claim on that gold. What you have is a claim on the bank as an unsecured creditor. And if there were ever a run on the bank, people looking for their gold, they would simply just close your account and pay you the money cash for the closing price. They don't have to, according to what you sign when you open those accounts, they don't have to pay you, they don't have to give you your gold. So that gold is unallocated, and it's used to suppress the market. Since 1971, and I don't know if you've ever seen, there was the minutes of a meeting by Henry Kissinger with the Secretary of the Treasury back in 1974. Look up what was said in that meeting, and it's very obvious that what they were trying to engineer is to maintain U.S. dollar supremacy. Then it was against what they believed were larger gold holdings by the European banks, because collectively the Europeans own more than the U.S., so they had more power. So they had to figure out, and this was discussed, you can look it up, the minutes of this meeting. And so they've been managed, and I was on Kitco 6 years ago in an interview, and I was asked the same question, and I said, at that point I used the term, they manage the gold price. I think they're outright manipulating it now, because I think we're in a global financial war.
If gold is manipulated, why invest in gold?
Because they can't keep this game up forever. And at some point, there never has there been a manipulation that's lasted forever. Eventually, everything comes out of the wash. And I think that given the dynamics between the U.S., China, Russia, and the rest of the world right now, I think that maybe we might see that eventuality sooner than I would have expected because of what's happening in Ukraine. But they can't suppress the gold price forever. And if what happens with China and Russia is what I predict may happen, then I think the gold price will find a new level. I'm not sure it's going to skyrocket, but it'll certainly take it to a level where it is equal to what they're pegging at whoever creates this new currency. And like I said, and again, I'm just speculating here, but if you have a 62-to-1 ruble ratio to dollar, and you use that 5,000 gram purchase number, then it indicates a $2,500 gold price. I don't know what it's going to be, but I just suspect it's going to have to be higher. And listen, if the U.S. is ever forced to have a partially backed dollar, gold-backed dollar, and they did it to the tune of 40% of M0 money supply, they would have to peg the price at around $15,000 an ounce. So I think there will be a time in the future where gold is going to be revalued, either by force or by consensus. But otherwise, because I just think all confidence has been lost in fiat currencies everywhere.